Fortunately, with the social freedom that women now have, lonely hearts murders are relatively rare these days. Yet the early 20th century saw a number of cases of poverty-stricken widows and single women attracted by the prospect of domestic security and enticed into the clutches of serial killers. One of the most notorious of these killers was the Frenchman Henri Landru. Ironically, this squat little man with his bald head, bushy eyebrows, and, above all, big red-brown beard was dubbed the French Bluebeard by the press. It was the foul-smelling black smoke that billowed from his chimney that led him eventually to the guillotine. Henri Désir Landru, born in Paris in 1869, was a clever scholar. He took courses at the prestigious School of Mechanical Engineering and, drafted into the army at the age of 18, rose to the rank of sergeant before his discharge. By that time, he had seduced his cousin, who bore him a daughter, and married her on leaving the army. With his knowledge of engineering, Landru set up as a garage proprietor in Clichy, northern Paris, but also operated as a dealer in second-hand furniture. This business brought newly widowed women to his door, where he would prey on their concerns and persuade them to invest their meager pensions in schemes he proposed, which he would promptly embezzle. As a result, in the years 1900 to 14, he served a succession of prison sentences on no less than 7 charges of fraud. Bitterly dishonored, his father committed suicide. It was when World War I broke out in 1914 that Landru first embarked upon his career of murder, targeting widows, many of whom had lost their husbands in the trenches of the Western Front. The details are known because he kept a small notebook in which he meticulously entered the names, sometimes coded, of his victims, their finances, and his own expenses. Like Kiss, he played advertisements in the matrimonial columns of newspapers. Widower with 2 children, aged 43, with comfortable income, affectionate, serious, and moving in good society, desires to meet widow or unattached lady, aged between 35 and 45, with view to matrimony. He made no mention that he was already married and with 4 children. He kept the replies in a series of folders for further study, at once rejecting many with the note SF to represent sans fortune, without resources. Despite his physical appearance, Landru was a persuasive and romantic talker, telling his potential victims what a comfortable life he could afford them, and his sexual appetite, it has been said, was insatiable. His first conquest, to whom he posed as Raymond Diart, was widow Jeanne Couchet, who had a 16-year-old son and owned a millinery shop. Despite the warnings of her sister and brother-in-law, in December 1914 she helped to furnish a villa at Verneuil, on the outskirts of the town of Dreux to the west of Paris, and for a short time the 3 lived there together as a family. It did not last long. The Couchets were never seen again after January 4th, 1915. Landru gained 5,000 francs and a gold watch that he presented to his real wife, even though he was separated from her. The police, much reduced in number because the fit and active ones had been drafted, had no time to investigate the circumstances. On May 1st, Landru placed another advertisement in Le Journal and attracted the attention of, among others, Thérèse Labourdeline. On June 21st, she sold her furniture, announcing that she was to marry a Monsieur Couchet, and moved into the villa at Verneuil. She was last seen alive 5 days later, and Landru immediately sold off her securities and personal belongings. Another of the women who answered the advertisement in Le Journal was Marie-Angélique Guillen. She arrived at Vernouillet on August 2nd and disappeared. Entries in the carefully kept notebook of his expenses within a few days. Landru at once sold her negotiable securities and, such as rail tickets, clearly reveal Landru's murderess by December, using forged papers, intentions. He had obtained a further 12,000. On December 8th, 1915, the day he took Madame Héon francs from her bank account. To Cambay, one return, 3.85 francs, one single. He already had another widow, 2.40 francs. Waiting in the wings, a Madame Héon. Another woman who had replied to Landru's using the name Dupont he advertisements, and to whom he proposed marriage, rented the Villa Hermitage at, was Anna Colomb, who gave up her position as a gambaise a little nearer Paris but stenographer with the Prudential Insurance Company in a more secluded location on December 19th, 1916. On December 27th, she traveled edge of the Rambouillet forest with Landru, who now called himself Diart, to Cambay, where he bought a large iron stove, and that was the last seen of her, for the kitchen. At his eventual, on December 27th, 1916, when he took Anna Cullum trial, he explained, the house had stood empty for 5 years. To the villa, and on September 1st, 1917, the day Madame, there was no proper kitchen. Buisson was last seen. There are similar entries for the installation. Latter date, there is also a note that Landru's cash-in hand had increased by 1,000 francs. Madame Héon arrived at the house. A few days later, Landru encountered a young servant on December 8th and was never seen again. For more than a year, Landru had been in correspondence with a wealthy widow, Célestine Buisson, under the name of Fremiette, and in June he proposed marriage. She bought a wedding dress, and the couple took the train to Cambay on August 19th, 1917, where she was last seen on September 1st. Much later, after Landru's arrest, a police search uncovered her clothes, hairpiece, and papers in his garage. Landru wasted no time in seeking another victim. Louise Jaume met her supposed husband-to-be through a matrimonial agent and joined him in Gambays on November 25. But from there she wrote to her aunt, I don't know what it is about him, but he frightens me. His terrible gaze disturbs me. One might say he is the devil. 5 days later, Landru emptied her bank account, representing himself as her attorney. Anne-Marie Pascal followed her on April 5, 1918, and Maria Thérèse Marchadier with her 3 dogs on January 13, 1919. However, time had run out for Landru. He had taken great care to distance his victims from their families and acquaintances, sending them postcards in which he explained that his wife was unwell and unable to write for a while. But Madame Buisson's sister grew suspicious and remembered that Célestine had told her she was leaving for Cambay with a Monsieur Guillet. She wrote to the mayor of the village, asking for news of anyone named Buisson or Guillet. He replied that he knew no one of either name, and that the tenant of the Villa Hermitage was a Monsieur Dupont. He proposed that she should meet the family of Anna Colomb, who had also disappeared from Gambé sometime before. The two families approached the police, who went to the villa and could find no trace of its occupant. The house was empty, although there were signs that it had recently been lived in. It was Célestine Buisson's sister who spotted Fremiet in a Paris street, emerging from a dry goods store. She inquired about him in the store and was told that his name was Guillet and that he lived in the nearby Rue de Rochechouart with his mistress. She immediately informed the police, and Landru was arrested on April 12, 1919. Investigators once more descended upon the villa, Hermitage. They dug in the grounds and searched the ponds surrounding the villa, and also at Vernouillet, but found nothing but the remains of Madame Marchadier's dogs, which had been strangled in the garden at Gambé. Believing erroneously that he could not be found guilty of murder, in the absence of any bodies, Landru maintained a confident silence. His cryptic notebook was discovered but provided no more than suggestive evidence. It was only when locals recalled the clouds of foul-smelling smoke that had on occasion emerged from the kitchen chimney at Gambé that the iron stove was examined. Hundreds of human bone fragments, teeth, hairpins, dress hooks, pins, and buttons made of mother-of-pearl and metal were discovered. At last it was possible to bring Landru to trial. The trial was held in November 1921. Landru was accused on 11 counts of murder, to all of which he pleaded not guilty. In court he was arrogant, making witty, dismissive replies to the questions of the prosecution and denying everything. The evidence mounted, but the sensation of the trial was the testimony of two women who had miraculously survived their visits to Gambé. One, Madame Falk, was in a sanatorium and could only provide an affidavit, but the other was the woman with whom Landru had been living in Paris at the time of his arrest. She was Fernande Segret, 29, a singer. Miles Segret described how she had met the accused under the name Guillet in May 1917 when he offered her a seat on a bus. He proposed marriage and she went to live with him in the Rue de Rochechouart. The official betrothal was made in May 1918, the date of the marriage being set for the end of the year, but it never took place. Fernande Segret testified that she had visited the Villa Hermitage 7 or 8 times, had cooked meals there, and had no knowledge of any bones among the cinders. But the forensic evidence was incontrovertible. Landru replied, as arrogant as usual, "The place is next to the graveyard, and there are not only gossips but practical jokers in the country. The place was left unguarded." On November 28th, Maître Godefroy began his summing up for the prosecution. He pointed out that Landru had written to 283 women proposing marriage, and went on to say, "He was admired because without the physical advances of a seducer, he so readily charmed and conquered women. Gentlemen, you see before you a cruel, callous, and ferocious man." Beside one of his fiancées, he kneels devoutly in church. An hour or two later, he is bending over her dead body in the act of cutting it up. Then, quite calmly, he will go and repose on the body of Mlle Fernande Segret. "I demand the supreme penalty, death, for Landru, the murderer of Vernouillet and Gambé. He is responsible absolutely and wholly for his deeds, and with no excuse. Death is the sole fitting punishment. Gentlemen, I conjure you, do not hesitate, strike without weakness." For Landru, Maître de Moreau Giaffre argued that there was no proof of the death of the missing women. There wasn't even time for Landru to burn so many bodies their papers were found. Well, gentlemen, as you know, there is a type of offender in whose possession women's papers are often found. The dealer in women. I do not wish to insult any of the ladies of whom we have heard. Our laws against the white slave traffic are designed to protect those who set off, as they believe, to an honest trade, only to find out the truth when they reach their destination. There, when it is too late, they are kept by force from returning. One thing is certain, those women had all broken with their families. All had signified their intention of traveling abroad. Now remember this. In each case, for 2 months after they disappeared, Landru strove to reassure their friends. It was always 2 months. That is the length of time it would take to reach Brazil. After that, friends and the law can do nothing. If they left their identity papers behind, it was because they had been told they must change their names. The times shown in the notebook have been said to be times of death. They might equally well have been times of departure. Arguing that it was dangerous to find Landru guilty of murder and send him to the guillotine, Moro Giafferi asked, "Suppose that tomorrow one of those women returns. What faith would you then have in yourselves strong enough to face the stony gaze of the ghost that came to you in the night and said, 'I did not kill, you killed me'?" It was to no avail. On the evening of November 29th, the jury declared a verdict of guilty. Landru appealed. "I swear that I never killed anyone." His appeal was rejected on February 1st, 1922, and he went to the guillotine on February 25th. Before his execution, Landru gave his attorneys a drawing that he had made while in prison. Had they taken it out of its frame, they would have found a full written confession behind it. It was not discovered, however, until nearly half a century later.